A very good morning, my dear children. Today we are going to discuss about the animal tissues. We have different types of animal tissues in our body on the basis of the function. Some of the tissues they just cover the body organs. Some of the tissues they connect the different parts of the body. Some of the tissues they help to give rigidity, and some of the tissues they help to carry messages from one part of the body to the other. So animal tissues on the basis of function can be divided into epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. So today we are going to talk about epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue, this is a tissue which forms the covering or it acts as a protective tissue in the animal body. It forms a covering of most of the organs and cavities, and it behaves like a barrier to keep all the body systems apart. It forms the lining of the kidney tubules. It forms the lining of the mouth. Anything entering into the body and coming out of the body, it has to pass through one layer of the epithelial tissue. Epithelial is usually separated from the underlying tissue by an extracellular fibrous basement membrane. Depending upon their structure and depending upon their function, epithelial tissue is divided into different types, that is squamous epithelial tissue, cuboidal epithelial tissue, columnar, ciliated, and stratified squamous tissue. Right? So let us study about, first of all, about the characteristics of the epithelial tissue. As I told you, it forms the covering that is separated from underlying tissue by fibrous basement membrane, and based upon the number of layers, the characteristics are they are tightly packed cells to form a continuous sheet. That is, the tissues they join together to form a continuity, and there is no space present between these tissues. And where are epithelial tissues present? They are present in the skin. They are present in the lining of the mouth, blood vessels, alveoli, the air sacs of the lungs, the kidney tubules. It covers the organs and cavities inside the bodies and separates different systems from each other. And the main function of the epithelial tissue is that it protects the body from drying, injuring, and infections. And as I told you that anything which enters into the body or leaves the body, it has to pass through a layer of epithelial tissue, that is the squamous epithelial tissue. Now, the classification of epithelial tissue. If the epithelial tissue, we have seen it that it is made up of single layer, you see that we have squamous, cuboidal, columnar. And if the epithelial tissue is made up of many layers, that is called a stratified squamous epithelial tissue. So there are epithelial tissues which are made up of single layer, and there are tissues which are made up of more than one layer. They are called stratified epithelial tissues. So simple, squamous, cuboidal, columnar. Right? So let's study one by one about these tissues. Now, As you can see here, squamous epithelial tissue. So it is very important to know the location where they are present, the structure and the function. Squamous epithelial tissues, these are very thin, flat, irregular cells, like we have the tiles of the floors, pavements. Similarly, these tissues are like the tiles of the floor, and they form the lining of the esophagus, that is the food pipe. They form the lining of the mouth. They form the lining of the alveoli of the lungs and the blood vessels. Now, what is the function of squamous epithelial tissue? It protects the underlying tissue from injury, any kind of germs. It helps in the exchange of gases in the lungs and materials between cells and blood. Any tissue which is under it, it is being protected by the epithelial tissue, and especially by the squamous epithelial tissue. Second is cuboidal epithelial tissue. Epithelium or epithelial, one and the same thing. Cells are cuboidal. The shape is like in the form of a cube, that is why we call them cuboidal, with round nucleus in the center. And where are they present? The location is, they are present in the kidney tubules, ducts of salivary glands. Salivary glands, the glands which secrete a juice called saliva. So they are present there, cuboidal epithelial tissues. And what's the function of cuboidal epithelial tissue, children? It gives mechanical strength, that is, it gives support. At times, the epithelial tissue sometimes folds and secretes substances. Therefore, it is called glandular epithelial tissue. The third type of epithelial tissue is columnar epithelial tissue. Columnar word has been derived from column, pillar-like. Cells, they are tall and less wide, placed side by side. As you can see in the diagram, these cuboidal epithelium, they are pillar-like and they are very close to each other. And the nucleus, as you can see, it is lying at the base. In the cuboidal, you can see the nucleus is in the center, and in the columnar, the nucleus is at the base. And where are these columnar epithelial tissues present? They are present in the inner lining of the intestine, in the respiratory tract. They have hair-like structures called cilia, which help to push the mucus, a fluid which is present in the respiratory tract. The hair-like structure cilia, it helps to push the mucus. And such type of epithelial, it is called ciliated columnar epithelial tissue. So, broadly columnar epithelium, but when columnar epithelium has got cilia present to push the mucus in the respiratory tract, that is called ciliated columnar epithelial tissue. And the function is, it helps in absorption and excretion and secretion. And the last is stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Squamous flat cells arranged in many layers to prevent wear and tear, so as to prevent any kind of injury. When the epithelial is arranged in layers, it is called stratified squamous epithelial tissue. You have different layers of skin. So we have stratified squamous epithelial tissues present in the skin. Skin to prevent wear and tear, tongue, esophagus, the lining of the mouth. And what is the function of stratified squamous epithelial? That is, it helps in protection, of course. It helps in preventing wear and tear. So today we have studied about the different types of epithelial tissues. The first one, squamous epithelial, cuboidal epithelial, columnar epithelial, and stratified squamous epithelial. So all of you should know the functions of epithelial tissue and the different types of epithelial tissue. Thank you so much, my dear children.